The morning my father introduced me to his colleagues at the Chicago Federal Reserve's annual security summit, he called me his little note taker. Not his daughter, not even by name, his little note taker. I was standing 2 feet to his left in a charcoal blazer I'd bought specifically for that day, holding a leather portfolio that probably cost more than his first car. He laughed when he said it, that easy, comfortable laugh he saves for rooms full of important men, and the Deputy Director of Homeland Security laughed too, and then everyone laughed and I smiled because I didn't know what else to do with my face. My father has spent 31 years building a reputation in federal financial intelligence. He is the kind of man who gets referenced by last name in Senate briefings. He golfs with people whose signatures appear on currency. He is, by every external measure, formidable. He has never once asked me what I do for a living. Not really. Not the way you ask when you actually want to know. I've been with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCENTOC, von CCN, for 6 years. I was recruited straight out of my master's program at Georgetown, which I attended on a full merit scholarship after finishing undergrad in 3 years. I specialize in transnational money laundering networks, specifically the kind that move capital through layered shell companies across 4 or more jurisdictions to fund things that appear in intelligence briefings that my father reads, but that I help write. He thinks I process paperwork. I have never corrected him, because the truth is I can't, not fully, not legally, and also because some part of me always believed the day would come when he would figure it out on his own. When he would look at me and see past the quiet and the patience and the careful way I choose not to take up space. That day came, just not the way I imagined. The summit was held at the Marriott on Michigan Avenue, a 40-story building with floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over the lake. It was mid-October and the water was the color of hammered pewter. I remember that detail because I kept looking at it during the opening remarks, grounding myself, when what I really wanted to do was walk out. I was there professionally. My supervisor had tasked me with observing a side meeting between 3 financial regulators and a private advisory group called Northgate Meridian Partners. They'd appeared twice in recent FinCEN reporting. Not flagged, not investigated, just a name that kept surfacing in the margins of larger cases the way a word you don't know keeps appearing in books until you finally look it up. My father was there as a featured panelist. He didn't know I'd been assigned to the same event. When he spotted me in the lobby, he looked genuinely startled, the way you look when you see a piece of furniture from your childhood in a stranger's house. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Work," I said. He nodded slowly, like that was a surprising but not entirely implausible answer, and then someone called his name from across the lobby and he turned away, and that was the end of our reunion. I found my seat at a table near the back of the secondary conference room. The Northgate Meridian meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in Salin Sea. I had 4 hours. I spent them the way I spend most of my working hours, reading, listening, watching the way people move through a room when they think no one is paying attention to them. There was a man at the registration table who checked his phone every 4 minutes with the regularity of someone monitoring something, not waiting for something. There was a woman in a green blazer who arrived with the Northgate group, but sat separately and left before the session started. There was a pattern in the way 2 of the regulators greeted each other. A half-second too long, too careful, the handshake of people who've rehearsed being strangers. I wrote none of this down. I never write things down in rooms where I shouldn't have them written down. My father found me at lunch. He sat across from me with a plate of salmon and a glass of sparkling water and the easy confidence of a man who has never once worried about being unwelcome. He introduced me to the man who sat down next to him, a senior examiner from the OCC named Richard, gray-haired and ruddy-faced, and the kind of loud that passes for charming in certain zip codes. "This is my daughter," my father said. "She works at Treasury." "Oh, doing what?" Richard asked, making the specific kind of eye contact that men make when they're being polite but not curious. My father answered before I could. "She's in document review. Processing, important work, keeps the whole machine running." He smiled at me. The smile that means, "Don't complicate this." I smiled back. I ate my lunch. Richard talked about his daughter's wedding venue and my father laughed at everything he said. I thought about a wire transfer. Specifically, I thought about a wire transfer I traced 8 months earlier, $4.2 million moving through a Delaware LLC into a Cayman account into a real estate holding in Luxembourg, with a beneficial owner whose name appeared nowhere in any public filing but whose signature pattern I recognized from 2 prior cases. The LLC was called NM Capital Partners, NM, Northgate Meridian. I had flagged this. I had written the memo. I had submitted it through proper channels and watched it get absorbed into the larger bureaucratic organism that processes such things on timelines measured in seasons rather than days. I did not know, sitting at that lunch table watching my father laugh at Richard's jokes, that the memo had moved faster than I thought. The 2 p.m. session started 11 minutes late. There were 9 people in Salon C. 3 were regulators. 3 were from Northgate Meridian, 2 men and the woman in the green blazer who had apparently returned. 2 were staff. I was the 9th, sitting near the door with my portfolio open to a blank page, which is the universally accepted posture for someone who is supposed to be there but isn't important enough to speak. The meeting was about compliance frameworks. This is what financial crimes often hide inside. Compliance frameworks, regulatory harmonization, cross-border reporting standards. Vocabulary that makes eyes glaze over. Vocabulary that I have spent 6 years learning to read the way other people read faces. One of the Northgate men, younger, well-dressed, the kind of shoes that cost $800, kept using a phrase I didn't recognize. He used it 4 times in the first 20 minutes. Origin concordance. We've structured this to ensure origin concordance across all participating entities. The filing discrepancies resolve once you apply the origin concordance model. Our legal team has reviewed the origin concordance protocol and we're confident in the framework. I wrote nothing down, but I felt the thing I always feel when a phrase appears too deliberately, too consistently from a single speaker, the cognitive equivalent of a door that opens only one way. After the session, I stepped into the hallway and called my contact at our regional field office. I spoke for 45 seconds. I used a reference number, not a name. Then I went back into the main conference area to find my father. He was near the bar with Richard and 2 other men I didn't recognize. He waved me over with a specific wave that means you can stand here, but you won't be speaking. I stood there. I listened. One of the men my father was talking to, silver-haired, a U.S. Marshal Service credential clipped to his jacket, was named Deputy Director Holt. He was, I understood from context, the 2nd highest-ranking law enforcement official at the summit. He was also the name on a real estate holding in Luxembourg. Not his name, but his initials in a beneficial ownership structure that I had spent 11 days untangling with a residential address in McLean, Virginia, that matched public records for a federal official with his title and tenure. I had no authority to act on this. I was an analyst. I wrote memos. Other people acted. But I also knew that my field contact had just relayed my reference number to a duty officer who was, at this moment, pulling a file that had been sitting in a queue for 6 months. And I knew that there were 2 men in this building who were not regulators and not Northgate staff and not me, 2 men who had arrived separately, eaten separately, and attended no sessions, who I had clocked the moment I walked in that morning. My father was laughing at something Deputy Director Holt had said. I touched my father's arm. He looked at me the way you look at someone who has just done something mildly surprising in public. I need you to come with me, I said. Right now. Don't ask me to explain it here. He blinked. What? Dad. I kept my voice the same. Same pitch, same volume, same expression. The training isn't about hiding your emotions. It's about understanding that your emotions don't always serve the moment. I need you to trust me for 3 minutes. Come with me. Richard looked uncomfortable. Holt looked at me with the flat assessment of a man who is accustomed to evaluating threats. I think your daughter needs something, Holt said to my father. His tone was slightly amused. I turned to Holt, not because I planned to, because the math changed in the moment. Sir, I said, I'm going to ask you to come with us as well. I'm going to give you a reason, and it's going to sound impossible, and I need you to make a decision very quickly. He straightened slightly. The amusement left. Who are you? I reached into my portfolio and showed him my credentials. Not my Treasury ID, the other one. The one with the blue stripe. He looked at it for 2 seconds. His entire posture changed. It was not dramatic. It was the opposite of dramatic, the controlled recalibration of a man with 30 years of federal service, but it was unmistakable. My code identifier is lamprey, I said. Quiet enough that only he could hear. You'll find the protocol under FinCEN Special Investigations, active case prefix RX7. He held my gaze for a long moment, then he said, "Lead the way." My father stared at me. I don't have a word for the expression on his face. I've tried to find one since. The closest I can get is a man watching a building he designed collapse and realizing in the same moment that it was supposed to. The three of us moved toward the east corridor. Richard called after us. Something about drinks at 6, and I didn't turn around. We were in the corridor for 8 minutes before two things happened nearly simultaneously. My field contact appeared from the stairwell with a colleague I recognized from the Chicago field office. And the door to Salon C opened and the younger Northgate man, $800 shoes, walked out and stopped when he saw Deputy Director Holt standing, flanked by federal agents. He stopped. He looked at Holt. He looked at me. He made the calculation people make when the math stops working. "I'd like to call my attorney," he said. "That's your right," my contact said. "What I'm able to say publicly is that Northgate Malidian Partners was not a compliant financial advisory firm. What I am not able to say publicly involves numbers and names and jurisdictions that will eventually appear in a federal indictment and not before. What I can say is that the phrase origin concordance does not appear in any regulatory framework, any compliance literature, or any legal statute. Because it was not compliance language, it was a passphrase, a confirmation signal used between parties who needed to verify in a room full of regulators that everyone present was operating under the same set of instructions. The beneficial ownership structure I had spent 11 days untangling was not Deputy Director Holt's. It was built to look like it was. It was a frame, the kind designed to ensure that when the structure collapsed, someone credible went down with it. Holt had been set up. He didn't know it. He knew it within about 4 minutes of reviewing what my contact laid out for him in a conference room on the 3rd floor, and the expression on his face during those 4 minutes was something I will carry with me for a long time. Because it was the expression of a man who has spent his entire career being careful and has just discovered that careful isn't always enough. He shook my hand when it was over. He held it for a moment longer than a handshake requires. "How long have you been tracking this?" he asked. 8 months on this specific structure," I said. "Longer on the network." He nodded slowly. "I've been in this building all day," he said, "and I had no idea." "That's usually how it works," I said. "My father was waiting in the main lobby. They'd asked him to stay, not detained, just asked. And he had the particular stillness of a man who is used to being the most informed person in any room and has just discovered he was not. When I came out, he stood up. He was holding his conference lanyard in both hands, turning it over the way people turn things over when they don't know what to do with their hands. "The man said I could go," he said, "but I waited." "I know," I said. He looked at me for a long time. The lobby was emptying around us, the late afternoon light coming flat and gray through the Michigan Avenue windows, the lake still out there the color of hammered pewter. "You wrote the memo," he said. "It wasn't a question. The one that started this, that was you." I didn't ask how he knew. He's not a stupid man. He has never been a stupid man. That's never been the issue between us. 8 months ago, I said. He pressed his lips together. He looked down at the lanyard. He's 62 years old, and he spent 31 years being the version of himself that rooms full of important men respect, and I watched him in that lobby try to locate the version of himself that was just my father. "I didn't know," he said. "What you do?" "I didn't." He stopped. Started again. "I told Richard you processed documents. I heard you. I didn't know. I know you didn't." He nodded, a long, slow nod, the kind that means I am processing something I don't have language for yet. "Your mother always said I didn't ask enough questions," he said. "She was right about a lot of things." He laughed, small and surprised. It was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him all day, nothing in it for any audience, just the reflex of a man who is caught off guard by something true. I'm sorry, he said. I don't. I'm not sure that covers it. It doesn't, I said, but it's a start. We stood there for another minute. People moved around us with rolling luggage and name badges and the particular exhausted energy of a conference day ending. Somewhere down the corridor, I knew federal agents were still working through documents, and my contact was on the phone with the duty office, and 6 months of casework was moving from a queue into an action file. And I was standing in a hotel lobby in Chicago, watching my father try to see me. Not the note taker. Not the one who processes documents. Not the quiet one. The unremarkable one. The one you can introduce with a joke and a wave. Me. He asked me to have dinner with him. I said yes. We walked out into the October cold together, the lake wind coming off Michigan Avenue sharp enough to make your eyes water, and he held the door open for me, which he has always done, which he has always known how to do, and for the first time in a very long time. It felt like a gesture rather than a habit. I didn't explain everything over dinner. Some of it I'm not allowed to explain, some of it I'm still working out how to say. But I told him enough. Enough that by the time the check came, he was asking questions. Real ones. The kind where you lean forward and your fork is forgotten on the plate, and you're not performing curiosity, you're actually in it. He asked how I learned to read shell company structures. He asked what origin concordance actually meant. He asked, very quietly, if I had been in danger today. I told him the truth, which was, not really. Not the kind he was imagining. My danger is almost always quieter than that. The danger of a wrong conclusion, a missed pattern, a document that looks clean because someone very smart made it look that way. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't redirect the conversation back to himself. It was, I realized, the first time we'd had a real conversation since my mother's funeral 4 years ago, and even that one had been mostly logistics. I paid for dinner. He didn't argue, which surprised me. Outside, waiting for my ride share, he said, I'd like to know more. About what you do, if you're able to tell me. Some of it, I said. Over time. He nodded. Pulled his coat closed against the wind. I told a room full of people you take notes, he said. You did. I'll spend a long time thinking about that. I know, I said. My car came. I got in. Through the window, I watched him standing on the sidewalk in the October dark. A man I have known my entire life, looking like someone who has just been introduced to a person he should have met years ago. The drive back to my hotel took 11 minutes. I spent them the way I spend most of my quiet moments, running back through the day, checking the logic, finding the seams. Everything held. The case would move now. The structure would unravel the way these structures always unravel. Slowly, then all at once, each layer pulling the next, the whole careful architecture collapsing inward until what's left is a set of facts that a jury can follow. And somewhere in that process, a memo with my name on it would surface in discovery. Just my name, no title, no explanation, exactly the way I prefer it. For now. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that day in Chicago. Not in any cosmic sense. Just the plain, unglamorous version of it. The idea that what you put in, quietly and consistently and without an audience, has a way of accumulating into something that eventually can't be ignored. I didn't walk into that summit planning a confrontation with my father. I didn't plan for Deputy Director Holt to be standing in the same room as a case I'd been building for 8 months. I just did the work. I showed up, I paid attention, I followed the thread until it led somewhere real. That's the only version of this story I know how to tell honestly. Because here's what nobody talks about when they talk about being underestimated. It takes something out of you, not all at once, slowly. The way water finds the low spots in a foundation. Every time someone talks over you or introduces you wrong or answers for you before you can speak, it costs something. And you can tell yourself it doesn't matter, that you know what you're worth, that their opinion is not your measurement. And most days, you'd be right. But some days, you sit at a lunch table and listen to your father tell a man you've never met that you process documents, and something in you goes very quiet. The question is what you do with that quiet. I did the only thing I've ever known how to do. I went back to work. I read the files. I traced the structures, I wrote the memos and submitted them through proper channels and trusted imperfectly and sometimes grudgingly that the system would move when it had enough to move on. Not because I'm patient by nature. I'm not, particularly, but because I understood that the alternative was noise, and noise in my line of work costs more than it gains. My father spent 31 years building a version of himself that commands rooms. I spent 6 building a version of myself that understands what's happening in them. Those are different skills. They don't always recognize each other on sight. What I keep coming back to is this: he wasn't malicious. That's the part that's hardest to sit with in some ways, because malice would be simpler. He just never looked. He had a picture of me from when I was 22 when he kept seeing it, kept introducing me from inside that picture, and it never occurred to him to check whether it still fit. That's not cruelty. It's a kind of carelessness that grows slowly in people who stop asking questions about the world, about the people standing right next to them. The work I do exists entirely because people stop asking questions. Every shell company, every buried beneficial owner, every layered transfer that moves money through 4 jurisdictions to hide what it actually is, all of it depends on someone, somewhere, deciding that the answer is probably fine, that someone else already checked, that the thing that looks a little off is almost certainly nothing. My father decided I was probably fine. Probably nothing. He was wrong, and I think he knows now that being wrong in that particular way about your own daughter for years, in rooms full of people, is the kind of thing that doesn't resolve in a single dinner conversation. It's a long correction. And he started making it, which is more than I expected and maybe exactly what I needed to see. I'm not interested in the version of this story where I get an apology that fixes everything. Life doesn't work in clean restorations. What I'm interested in is the version where two people sit across a table and one of them finally starts asking real questions, and the other one finally has room to answer them. That's what we're building now, slowly. It's not drama, it doesn't have much of an arc, but it's real, and that turns out to be enough.